organizers to Anywhere to having me here. This is my first conference. I'm very excited about that. And my name is Marcia Condoy. I am from Peru. When I was in Peru, I was litigating in labor law. For that reason, this topic inspired me a lot. And I was litigating labor law until I decided to dedicate my life to animal law. So today I want to talk about an animal labor approach as an alternative path to welfareism and abolitionism in a maybe similar way that Saskia talked before. Because I find that the dualism between welfareism and abolitionism is creating an unnecessary division in animal lawyers. So, to construct my animal labor approach as an alternative path to this dualism, I want to identify what are the characteristics of welfareism and abolitionism. Welfareism talks about rights. Welfareism does not talk about rights, but abolitionism does. Welfareism recognizes and regulates human-animal interactions and relationships. Abolitionism denies that human-animal relationships. Indeed, abolitionism says that we have to stop breeding domesticated animals and don't have interaction with wild animals. Welfareism works within the current economic system of animal production, and for that reason is very pragmatical. On the other side, abolitionism rejects the current economic system of animal production, and for that reason is very idealistic and difficult to apply in the reality now. But also important for me is to identify what are the commonalities between welfareism and abolitionism. Both in welfareism and abolitionism, we will find that the main character are human beings, because all the attention is put in what humans are doing. Animals are the oppressors, humans are the oppressors, humans are the liberators, but always humans are the main character. What happened in welfareism and abolitionism is that we talk of animals emphasizing a passive victimhood. Animals are voiceless, animals are victims, animals are passive agents. And with welfareism, abolitionism don't talk about animal agency. Or if they talk, they don't apply that into practice. But for me, animals are more than victims. For me, animals are more than voiceless. For me, animals are active agents and also are workers. How is that? My first approximation to animals as workers was in an essay of Jason Rival called Animals Are Part of the Working Class. In this essay, Jason Rival tells the story of animals from a different perspective of the normal history. He applied a methodology called history from below. What is history from below? Well, the traditional history is a history from above. It's a history told by those who are above and can see the rest from another perspective. From this perspective of the winners, of the conquerors, of the allies, of the white man, the unrepresented groups remain in the background, and unrepresented groups such as women, people of color, or animals are victims and are passive agents. Nevertheless, if we want to understand animals, we have to apply a history from below. History from below, as you can predict, tells the story from the perspective of those who are below, in this case, animals. And from their perspective, animals are more than victims. They have voiceless, they have subjectivities, etc. History from below allows us to ask questions such as how animals have participated in the construction of the world, how animals have shaped class relationships with humans, etc. From this perspective, from a perspective of the animals, we can say that animals are workers. And how is that animals are workers? From an objective point of view, we know that animals have participated of the creation of the industry, Animals have participated of the creation of the global economy because, for instance, horses have made roads. Llamas have helped the conquerors, the Spanish Empire, to exploit silver in Peru. Cows give milk to be sold in the markets. And pigs use their metabolic processes to produce flesh, something that will not happen if the animal would not be alive. We're not alive. But from this perspective, a horse that made roads is no different from a construction tractor. What makes different a horse from a construction tractor is the subjective element, agency. And I want to define agency as the ability to influence their own life, to create their own story, to make choices, and to resist and cooperate. For my purpose, agency is manifest in two ways, through resistance and cooperation. Resistance, such as when a donkey refuses to obey, such as when an elephant escaped from the circus and even tried to kill his master. Resistance is an intentional response to mistreatment. It's not a mechanical failure, such how Descartes thought in the past, are a very intentional response to mistreatment. As animals can resist, they also can cooperate. Animals show cooperation, show protection, care, intention, initiative, when they are treated in a very good way, or in a respectful way, in a fair way. And if we consider cooperation, we can understand that animals, when working, also can flourish. Imagine, for instance, a shepherd dog that is running with the sheep in the field. So this is the base of animals as workers. So my proposal is that an animal labor approach can recognize animals as workers and can recognize animal agency. And as you maybe have noted until this moment, is that I am not talking about very intricate or difficult arguments or concepts such as cognition, self-awareness, consciousness, or nociception. These concepts that are used by welfarism and abolitionism are very difficult to explain to the common citizen. An argument that says, hey, you have to treat animals well, because if you treat well an animal, the animal will cooperate, and if you mistreat an animal, the animal will refuse and put resistance, is from my point of view, a straightforward argument, a way to explain why we have to treat animals in a better way. And the people who better understand that animals are workers, that animals will put resistance before mistreatment, etc., are the peasants, are not the scientific people. And this is very interesting for me because it is more easy to explain to the people who is not in the academia or in animal studies. Even peasants have called their animals work horses, work oxes. There is a whole category of animals called work animals. So animal work, animal labor is not different. It is not difficult to understand. And finally, an animal labor approach recognizes that human-animal interactions will exist forever. Abolitionism denies and rejects human-animal interactions. But from my point of view, we always will be with animals because that is our nature. It's difficult to thinking of future world without animals. And also because of that, animal labor approach is aligned with animal citizenship theory and interspecies society. So if animals are workers, the first thing that we have to do is recognition. In my experience as labor lawyer, I can say that the most of the people is working in informality, in informal conditions, because when they are in informal conditions, the employer don't have to pay vacations, don't have to pay a minimum salary, etc. So the first thing to claim for rights, labor rights in this case, is recognition. If the society recognizes animals as workers, we have to regulate human-animal interactions, but not anymore through welfareism regulations, rather through an animal labor law. So, I said before that I want to identify what are the commonalities or differences of welfareism and abolitionism, because I want that animal labor approach, the animal labor framework that I want to present, take the better of welfareism and abolitionism. I want that animal labor approach recognize and regulates human-animal relationships, and also from abolitionism, I want animal labor approach claiming for real rights for animals. And what I will do is regulate human-animal relationships through animal labor rights. And from welfareism, I want the animal labor approach will be pragmatical. Animal labor approach can apply right now because we are not asking for abolition. We want to regulate the current existing human-animal interactions through labor rights. And moving forward, I want also animal labor approach talking of animals in an active way, that recognizing that animals have been part of the creation of the world, and also I want to recognize animal agency. These four recognize or for identify which rights animals will have in the future. So this is the legal framework that I want to present for labor rights, labor law for animals. 3 elements: legal principles and labor rights. 3 elements to identify where and when there is an human-animal labor relationship. First, there has to be subordination to human control. Then the subordination can have the form of care or captivity, etc. Also, to say that an human-animal labor relation exists, the animal has to generate direct benefits to the human. And this will allow us to identify who is the employer, who is the responsible of the animal. And the benefits can have the form of service and products. And also, there has to be consistency in time. Because, for instance, when I meet a stray dog on the street, there is no a labor relationship. So, consistency in time make reference that this relation is not incidental, it's intentional. I have this animal to obtain milk or to obtain care. So, it can be daily, permanently, weekly, etc. All human-animal interactions that are not inside of this scheme have to be regulated through criminal law or administrative law. Now, legal principles that have the form of political guidelines that inform which is the purpose of this animal labor approach. First, for me, it's very important progressiveness and no regression, because all the labor rights and better conditions that we will recognize for animals can always can go forward and never come back. And also, this is very important because we will recognize that the achievement of rights, of labor rights for animals is progressive. We cannot say now, today, all the animals have better conditions in farms. We have to take the present state of affairs and say, okay, let's improve. And when you improve, you can never take off the labor rights of animals without justification. I have to correct this word, is humane work. And humane work make reference that all the work that is good for humans is good for animals and vice versa. For instance, workers in slaughterhouses are suffering in the same way that animals are suffering in the slaughterhouses. This is not a healthy environment for humans, neither for animals. So this kind of labor places have to disappear. The state has to promote the disappearance of this kind of labor places. The principle of animal interest recognizes that animals have determinate interests that have to be taken into account. The most important here in some of these interests, for me the most important is the interest of the animal in not being made to suffer and the interest of the animal in not be killed. So the state has to promote progressively to the disappearance of that kind of work that means suffering of death or killing to animals. The species-specific principle that the task, the tools, the activities of the animals at work have to take into account the needs of the species, but also the animal as individual, because every animal has a different story, different traumas, different preferences. So also that has to be taken into account, and subsidiary application of the human labor law. For instance, the principio operario. That means that in front of a hard case, the judge has to rule in favor of the worker. So there will be hard cases that we cannot resolve with the scheme of animal labor, but the judge or the person who will apply the law can apply human labor law. And finally, what are the rights that I am thinking for this scheme that, of course, is a numerus apertus list. This list can grow in the future. The right of animals to a labor union, that is the most important because only a union will ensure the enforcement of the labor rights. Of course, that this union will be conformed by organizations or humans that have to have a broad standing to represent animals in courts or in negotiations. The right to a remuneration that could be in kind with the direct provision of necessary goods and services, for instance, enough food, enough water, etc. The right to a healthy and safe working conditions, that the workplace don't have to put in danger the integrity of the life of the animal. The right to occupational veterinary care, that animals have to receive veterinary care for injuries caused in work or as a consequence of the work. And then also we have the right to rest and leisure. Animals need to have a space of freedom in their lives. And in this time, the question is that they have to have them as freedom as possible, the maximum of freedom possible in their lives. So in these hours, animals can develop their agency, they can walk where they want, etc. And also, when animals will be exhausted or animals will be injured, they cannot work. They cannot be obligated to work. And the right to a decent retirement. Animals should have a pension in the same way that remuneration. It can be through the provision of products and services for their life. And finally, the right to a human training, that animals have the right that their human co-workers or human supervisors they have to be trained in the better way to treat or to handle an animal. And the state can provide training courses and certification of competences. And well, there are many other points about my ideas of labor and animal labor approach, but by now this is everything. Thank you so much.